And this is my frustration. 12.5%, 13% is, we're not big enough for you yet. Like, what do you want? Do you want instant diabetes and like an instant hangover? Like, what are you doing this for?
I wouldn't say no.
Right.
Cheers.
Welcome back to the Tap Takeover Podcast, brewery interview series. I'm here with the boys to sit down for a very special interview. Guys, I know this is something that we've been talking about for a long time amongst ourselves. It's something that we got into podcasting for, talking to some of our favorite brewers at some of our favorite breweries. We're sitting down with Central Waters this week, folks, and we are very excited.
It's all about the big bourbon barrel-aged stouts. It's what we love most here on the podcast, and this is kind of the ultimate barrel-aging program here in the state of Wisconsin.
Some would say the Midwest. They started winning big awards with their 16th anniversary bourbon barrel aged stout, and the anniversary beers have been fantastic. The Black Gold, I think we've all tried in one way or another over the years. Amazing beer, aged for 3 years in bourbon barrels. And then, of course, you've got the Maple Bourbon Stout, which was a surprise this year. Possibly one of my favorite beers all year. You guys have tried some of their beers. What are some of your favorites?
All right. Well, I like the Brewers Reserve series. Really big fan of the barley wine, Cassie and Sunset. Those are the kind of...
I mean, they have their regular line, but let's face it, guys. The barrel aged stuff is where it's at. They have the second biggest barrel aged warehouse in the United States of America, right there in Amherst, Wisconsin, right behind Goose Island.
Yeah, I would say it's important to note that an independent brewery has the second biggest barrel aging program behind a program owned by Anheuser-Busch. That speaks volumes to the success that they've had with their stouts, the success that they've had with their barrel aging program, and just the amount of dedication that they've put into that. But I would actually argue that some of their other beers, some of their regular stuff, their IPAs, the horseshoes and hand grenades, and some of those other beers are also really fantastic.
The Mud Puppy Porter is a fantastic porter. I mean, it's in their normal lineup, and it's a really solid go-to beer.
We'll definitely be getting into that in the interview here, but before we do that, let's get into some of the big beers that we're going to be doing on this small live tasting. We've got a very special vertical for you guys. We're going to be going 16 through 19, the anniversary beers. So get ready for some fun tasting. And Andy, why don't you tell us about our first two up?
So the first two we're trying tonight is the 16 and the 17. 16's been laying down for 4 years, and it's absolutely fantastic. Just absolutely delicious. Perfect. So chocolatey. I thought that would fade.
The chocolate is massive on this, and it's multiple layers of chocolate. It's the milk chocolate. It's the fudge. And for me, what's really interesting in this, because it was aged 21 months just in the barrels alone, I'm not getting a lot of the bourbon. To me, it's actually broken down to its constituent parts. The vanilla, the oak, the wood. I'm getting almost like a dark leather off of this. It's going down to its individual bits.
Yeah, extremely smooth, not aggressive. We have the 16 and 17 here. We've been going back and forth. It really is amazing how it changed from that 1 year.
They said that the 16 is aged for 21 months, and the 17 is a blend of two different of their barrel-aged stouts. So it's two completely separate beers that were both anniversary beers back to back.
Yeah, and a little known fact for the beer nerds out there. So the 16 has one beer as its base, whereas everything after that has had a blend of different stouts. But the 19 has the biggest blend of the base beer that was in the 16. So it's gotten a lot of comparisons to the 16. We'll have to try that one, in a little bit.
It's everything good that you like about this style of beer.
So, since we like to lay down our beers for a while, where do you guys think this would go if this was laid down for another year or two?
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either.
I couldn't resist.
Yeah.
I mean, that would just be the point.
Well,
if I had more of this, I would drink more of it.
Yeah,
yes.
No, this is perfect. I don't know what their intentions were or what the intentions or what other people have done, but this is perfect right now.
I would disagree with you guys. I think this beer could get laid down for another few years, and it's big enough and bold enough that it would still have most of these flavors and probably be a little further into the blackberry kind of flavor.
See, when I think of laying it down more, you take away that aggressiveness I just don't think this has that. I think
So
it's
it's
already
super mellow.
It's so mellow, so smooth. I don't know why you would lay down more.
It's especially mellow compared to the 17. What do you guys think of
Well,
this
that's.
one?
I mean, the word that I used was aggressive because it still has that little bit of punch to it. You know,
It's got a little burn,
a little burn that you don't. I didn't think I was going to get from a 3-year-old beer that was already aged. Would you say 18 months?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
So this
And-
has been aged for a while, and it still comes out a little hot. I mean, it's not. I mean, obviously it's aged.
Yeah, I'm just getting more brightness from it. I mean, that's what my first thing is. It pops. The 16, super mellow.
Looks like those chocolate and vanilla notes are starting to come out. You still have that nice bourbon flavor there, but it's not as bitey. But you still taste it.
Yeah, I can definitely taste the barrel in this one. The barrel's definitely speaking to me in the 17, whereas the barrel's dissipated into the beer in the 16. I still stand by you can age that 16 longer, but you might not need to. And the 17 could definitely go another year or two.
I do like how it's opening up a little bit more. It's good, but it's still. I would lay down the 17. 16's perfect.
And now I think it's a great time to get into the interview. What do you guys think?
Let's
Do
roll.
it.
Nestled in the rolling hills of central Wisconsin lies an award-winning craft brewery that is making some of the finest barrel-aged beers in the country. Despite being miles from a major population center, their anniversary beer is sold out in minutes and has thousands of people standing out in the freezing January cold of Wisconsin winter to get their allocation. With their beers in the highest of demand, Central Waters is proof that following your dreams can lead to success. Co-owners Anello Mollica and Paul Graham have done this while remaining true to their core philosophy of sourced local and being ecologically responsible. We're joined today by co-owner Anello Mollica and lead brewer Simon Nielsen. Hello, gentlemen, and thanks for taking some time to join us on the Tap Takeover Podcast.
What up?
Hello.
So tell us about the brewery. So for somebody who has not made the trek out here before, what can they expect walking in for the first time?
Well, we've been here since so we started building this facility in 2006. Started production here in 2007. You know, when we first built this brewery, Paul and I, it was just that first front area. I suppose we did have a tap room, but we built the bar ourselves, and it was, you know, almost neck high. We built it like way too high by accident because didn't really know what we were doing. So we had a standing bar for quite a while, but you know, we expected at that time maybe a dozen beer nerds to show up on the weekend and fill the growler. So we manned the bar with our wives. We don't advertise for that tap room. We never really have. And then word of mouth grew, and suddenly it was really, really busy, and we started having to hire bartenders, and then we had to hire a bar manager, and then we had to expand the tap room, and we've expanded the tap room quite a few times. So now when you pull up, the view you get when you see Central Waters is not how it looked when we built this place. We added that on to kind of give it that welcoming look as you're driving down Allen Street and you see the brewery and you have their beer garden and the brick and a nice logo on the building and all that stuff. That's all just smoke and mirrors, man. That's something that didn't exist before. Yeah. So we tried to make it a welcoming place, you know, because one thing, as you guys have traveled around quite a bit and seen a lot of other breweries and a lot of the tap rooms, there's not a lot of other brewery tap rooms where the tap room itself is not separated from the production facility by a wall of some kind. So when you're in the tap room, you are literally in the brewery, you know, there's just that half wall. So you get the heat, the smells, everything that comes with the brewery you get inside of our tap room. So I think that makes it kind of a unique experience.
I think so. Some of my favorite tap rooms are the ones where you can actually smell the brewery. You know, some are a little antiseptic and they're very separated from the actual production process. To actually be in there and actually see some of the work going on, I think it's really unique and pretty fun when you come up here.
Yeah, there's a sign too. When you pull up, you go past Simon's house, and then Simon's usually sitting outside. He'll give out free samples to anybody that's coming up. Just gotta go to his house. Yeah.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Pro tip from Anello.
That's a good pro tip.
I'm just kidding. He does not live near the brewery. I was just kidding.
You're an asshole. To add to that, though, before I worked here, this is always like my dream brewery to work at. I'm from Appleton, so I lived 45 minutes from here. And so I started here 4 years ago. But before that, my fiance and I would drive up here probably once a month. And so I remember coming to the first anniversary party, I think, which was 14, right?
14, yeah.
I remember at the end of that anniversary party, when things were closing down, walking up and buying a handful of bottles of 14. It was, how many do you want? And you could get however many bottles you wanted. Then I think that year you guys won the gold at GABF, right?
Correct.
And then after that, it was kind of a shit show, all the anniversaries after that. And I remember being in line to buy that beer the next year at 15, and I was like 8 people from the table, and they ran out. But it's been cool because it's been an evolution to see the brewery. And then, the 16th anniversary, I was working here for that party. But to see the tap room and the brewery go through this evolution, like Anello said, we added onto the front of the tap room, and it's just a whole different experience that people get when they come here now versus what they got 4, 5, 6 years ago when I was coming, just as a customer, and it was a flat metal-faced building at the front, and now what you see when you pull up.
I have to expound on that here because I don't know if you know Simon's backstory and how he got his job here.
We've heard you've had quite an interesting journey to get where you are today, Simon. A lot of harassment, a lot of comeback later. Can you give us your backstory?
I don't know if I'd say comeback a little bit. Go ahead and tell the story, and I'll just be the color man as you're telling the story.
Well, you're right. It was a lot of harassment, and
Really?
Hey, we've said when you got hired, harassment will not be tolerated here. It will be graded.
basically I was a home brewer. Most brewers start the same way. They're home brewers, and they started as a hobby, and they want to get into brewing. And basically it was the same thing for me. Central Waters was 5,000 or 6,000 barrels when I started emailing them saying I wanted a job. That was in 2010, I want to say, that I started emailing the brewery here. And, at that point I had just started home brewing, and I was really hoping, just get my shoe in the door somewhere. They were still small enough that I thought maybe I'd have a shot in the dark at it, and apparently not. Because Anello's shaking his head. But my point is I knew that they were definitely going somewhere. Already at that size, very, very, very well respected. We had a really good following. And, if you hopped on Beer Advocate, everybody was talking about this small brewery out in Amherst, Wisconsin. And so I wanted to try to get in on it as soon as I could because I saw this potential there. So I started emailing them probably once every 2 or 3 months, not to annoy them too much.
For fuck's sakes.
Yeah, right.
I remember those conversations with Paul. They're like, that Simon dude emailed again. I'm like, really? What's he doing? He works at a plastic factory or something?
This industry, especially nowadays, so many people want to do it or they think that they want to do it. So, they basically proved it out by going, get some schooling. We only hire people that have some schooling, which is total BS.
Total bullshit. You're the only one.
I'm the only one that works here that has any sort of schooling for brewing.
Total bullshit. It was just like that way to be like, dude, stop.
Oh yeah, I get it.
But you did it.
And yeah, so I went to Siebel. I took a couple courses at Siebel, which is a brewing school in Chicago. And it was some of their shorter courses. It wasn't their 12-week course or anything. I just couldn't afford that. But I did as much as I could afford. Maxed out my credit cards to do it. Came back and I kept sending my most up-to-date resume to the brewery and keeping these guys up to date. After I'd done all that, Paul emailed me back after I took those 2 courses and kind of said, that's great, but we've all read all the books. He said we've all read all the books. So after he told me to go to school, he came back with, that's great, but we've all read all the books. We only hire people that have had practical experience.
At some point you take a hint, right?
Apparently not.
Apparently not. So.
Yeah. And I'm starting to wish I would have.
10 minutes into the podcast and you're just figuring this out?
This thing might end with me walking out.
Breaking news: Simon has left Central Waters.
Breaking news: Central Waters is hiring
Tap
for a new
Takeover causes split, causes rift.
Ka-ching! There it is.
But yeah, no, they pushed me to get practical experience.
Oh man, we are a bunch of assholes. God.
But
Central Waters is not coming across very
No,
well.
I don't often look back and retrospect. Man, I feel like an asshole.
So I emailed every brewery in a 2-hour radius of Appleton. And when I say every brewery, I mean like every brewery, every brew pub I could think of, and every production brewery I could find. And I was working swing shift at the plastic factory, 12-hour shifts. So basically the way it broke down is I had like half the year off because I'd work 2 days on, 2 days off, 3 days on, 3 days off. So I was offering all these places to work all my days off for free, and just to get this experience. Three Sheeps in Sheboygan, which had just started up at the time, took me up on my offer, and they were a Grant, which is their owner there, he was really awesome with me. The brewery out in California had kind of done the same thing with him when he was starting up. He kind of extended the offer to me, and they were just starting up too, so I'm sure he was looking for all the free help he could get. But still, it was cool of him to offer it to me. But one thing I couldn't figure out was Stone Cellar, which is a brew pub in Appleton, which is right up the street from me, would not give me the time of day for either like a free internship or to give me a job, and I couldn't figure it out. And where I was living at the time, I could see him from my house. Anyway, so I got this, this offer for an internship at Three Sheeps. I was so excited. Finally, I was going to be like, have my foot in the door at any brewery, which is like, at that point, it was like my life's dream. So I went up to Stone Cellar to get like pizza and a beer to celebrate the day this happened. One of the brewers from Stone Cellar sat down next to me. I knew him from being there quite a bit, and he used to be one of the bartenders there, and I was a regular there because it was right up the street from me. We started talking. I told him I'd just gotten back from Siebel, and I just got this internship at Three Sheeps. And he goes, wait a second, you're Simon? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, oh, I've had you confused with somebody else. Oh, can you hold on a second? And he went and talked to the owner, came back, and he goes, you're going to get a call from us tomorrow. He goes, I've been telling him not to hire you for the last year because I thought I had you confused with this other guy who annoyed the shit out of me. And I kept telling our owner, if you hire that guy, I'm quitting.
I thought maybe Anello had called ahead.
So it worked out good. Three Sheeps is going to be an hour and a half drive each way on all my days off, which was plus whatever I was going to end up working there for no pay. And I walked to work at Stone Cellar, and I got, not much, but I got, paid a little bit to work hourly there while I got experience cleaning tanks and kegging beer and all that stuff. So it was perfect. It was still the same thing. Every 2 or 3 months, I'd give them a call just to let them know I was still interested and still planning on doing this. And finally, in November of 2013, they called, and one of their brewers, Lagunitas, was just opening up in Chicago. He was from Chicago, so he was heading back home. So they called me and offered me a job to come brew here, and that's how that happened.
In truth, he's right how all that broke down. But while it was going
here it
on,
comes.
we weren't like, we had hired a brewer too, but like, he kept doing this. And when we hit a point where we needed a brewer, Paul and I sat and talked about that. We're like, that Simon dude literally did everything Paul asked him to do. Paul asked him to go to school, get a job, to get experience, and Simon did all of those things. We're like, we fucking have to hire this guy now. There's no way we can't hire him, right? But truthfully, and I don't say this just because Simon's sitting next to me or we're doing this podcast, Central Waters would not be what Central Waters is without Simon. Simon is just as integral to who we are and the identity of Central Waters as Paul or myself or anybody else here. So we're really, really fortunate that we have not just guys like Simon, but our entire crew right now is the best crew that we've had at Central Waters since we've been in existence. And Simon leads the brew house, and all these awesome beers that we're cranking out, all this new stuff, like we were talking to him earlier, like Caught in the Rain is out of the wheelhouse for Central Waters, right? It's Simon. HHG, Simon. Like all these things. Paul and I owe Simon, the identity of this brewery at this point. He's done a great job.
Wow.
You want to make out?
Finally.
Makes for good radio. Yeah.
All right. Now let's get into your beginnings with craft beer in general, and then how did you meet Paul?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm from Milwaukee, and Paul's from Rochester, Minnesota. So we both came here for college, to go to UW-Stevens Point, and we just met, as freshmen in the dorms type of thing. We've told the story a lot of times, but it is absolutely the truth. 21 to buy beer, 18 to buy the ingredients. No bullshit. And no, keep in mind, this was like 1994, right? So this is like way before the craze of craft beer. Like that wasn't even a hint on the horizon, really.
Yeah,
like,
so you weren't like drinking a lot of craft beer at the time.
But
that kind of inspired it. Yeah,
craft beer at the time was
kind of had to make.
And I'm not knocking the beer, but like when you'd go to a kegger, like a house party, and there was Point Amber and Liney's Honey Weiss, you're like, get the fuck out of here! This is off the hook. It's $5 cups, man. Let's do this. It was. That was a rockin' party, right? So we started making it ourselves. We literally started in the dorms with a half-gallon jug of apple cider and some bread yeast. And we dumped it in the apple cider and let it ferment in the dorms. And then somebody, I don't remember who it was, but one of our friends told us that we would go blind if we drank it. So we didn't know any better. We believed them, right? So you have to understand, this is pre-internet days, right? The internet didn't exist. And it's hard for people to fathom that, what life was like before cell phones and internet. None of those things were in existence. So it's not like, yeah. Now you say AOL and someone's like, no, you spelled LOL wrong. So we didn't know any better. The only source that we had back then for learning about making beer was Charlie Papazian and the Joy of Homebrewing. That was the book. That was the Bible. That was all that existed. That and your couple older buddies around the neighborhood that made beer. So at any rate, we didn't drink that apple cider because we were afraid we'd go blind because we didn't know any better. And then we started homebrewing, actually making beer, sometimes at a friend's house off campus, sometimes in the kitchen in the dorms. And I remember the first batch, we totally fucked it up. We were bottling it. I don't remember if the beer was good or not before bottling. But I remember the guy that we were doing it with had done it before, and he was like, yeah, now we just have to add priming sugar to the beer so it carbonates in the bottle. How much? He's like, I don't know, I think it's like a tablespoon per bottle.
Oh, shit.
So we were dumping tablespoons of sugar into each 12-ounce bottle.
Oh, my God.
And then filling it with the beer and capping it. There was a dorm room on our floor that was vacant, and we had like Jimmy the lock open on, and that's where we stored all of our cases of carbonated beer and carboys and shit like that. This ting 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 ting, like they started popping. At the time, my roommate wasn't Paul. I was living with a different guy in the dorms, and he had, I'll never forget this, it was the funniest thing. It was like out of a cartoon. He had just got out of the shower. He's wearing this like Big Lebowski robe, pops one of the bottles open, the cap flies off, and the beer flies out, all foam, covers his face and his hair. And when he kind of like looks up, it's just like eyelids opening up, you know, in the whites of his eyes. And the beer was awful, man, just like undrinkable stuff. But we didn't care because it's like 1995, 1994, whatever, and you didn't have a frame of reference really of bad beer. And so, I mean, back in those days, like, you know, Pete's Wicked Ale, which isn't even around anymore, that was the really high-end beer that you'd get, was a Pete's Wicked. So that's kind of where that started for us. And then it just progressed. We just kept homebrewing and got to know friends that were part of the Stevens Point had started a homebrew club at that time. By the end of college, I lived in a house, and in my garage, we had built a pretty sweet homebrew setup that was on wooden tiers with half bros with the tops cut off, and we were doing 15 gallons at a crack, and the beers were good. We were throwing house parties and having a band and charging cup fees, and it was just our homebrews on tap. We had a fridge in the basement with tap handles coming out of it, and we'd have a homebrew party and charge cup fees to get into the basement for a band and homebrews, you know.
I bet that was a fun house.
It was a good time, man. So then we graduated from college. I leave and I go to Alaska. At that point, Central Waters had started, and it was started by two other guys that were part of the homebrew club in town, Jerome and Mike, and they hired Paul. And so I come back from Alaska. In the meantime, Paul had bought a house. I still don't know how the fuck he bought a house, though. Like, we were fresh out of college, like, what the fuck? Anyways, I need a place to live, so I go live with Paul again. You know, his best friend, room together, whatever. He's got a house. He's working at the brewery, and he's like, hey, I'm pretty sure I could get you a job. Sure, you know, I'll take a year off. I have a degree, but I'm gonna just, like, ignore that for a year and just have fun. So I started working at Central Water, so it was Paul and I working for the original owners, Jerome and Mike. After about, it was probably only 6 months, maybe 8 months, it was pretty clear that they couldn't afford to pay really either of us, but for sure not two of us. Sound familiar? So Paul was hired first. I offered to go. There was a brew pub at the time in Stevens Point called Isidore Street, because now this is late 90s now. This is like 99. That's when the brew pub craze kind of peaked in the late 90s, and then everything crashed, and everybody said craft beer is done. Everybody assumed craft beer was totally done at that point, because a lot of those brew pubs were making some pretty shitty beer, including the one that we had here in town. So I remember when I took the job, I told the owners of the place, I'll take this job, but all the beer's getting dumped, and then we're starting from scratch. And they agreed to that, so I took it. Little did I know that place was already spinning down the toilet. There was no real saving that. So I don't even remember, like, I'm going to say, like, my beers were good, but I don't even remember, you know, I mean, that was a long time ago. There's been a lot of brewing since then. So I worked for them for a while. They closed, and then I went and worked at Point Brewery, and I worked there for a while, and I hated it. But in hindsight, it was the best job I had, because the job that I got hired for was for second shift brewer. You know, I'm like 22 or whatever, and, you know, second shift brewer, that's fucking perfect. You know, going till 2 o'clock, you're done at 11, the bars are still open, you're single, you're like, this is perfect. Last second, I didn't get that job. I got hired as a relief operator, which had to learn every job in the brewery. And start at 6 o'clock in the morning and be done at 3 type of thing. I was like, oh shit, not really want to do. A lot of time on the packaging line, learning filtering, learning all that stuff, and it's not what I want to do. But I'm glad I did that because I learned all those jobs at a large scale brewery that has served me since then. And I left there and worked for another brewery up north, and then I left there and came back. In the meantime, while I'm doing all of this, in 2001, Paul bought Central Waters from the original owners with another guy, Clint. So I came back and I worked for Paul and Clint as their brewer for a bunch of years. And then I decided to go back and use my degree a little bit. And funnily enough, I was an alcohol and drug abuse counselor for the state of Wisconsin for a little while, so I did that.
So Simon, the whole Siebel thing was bullshit. It sounds
It's all bullshit. I said that earlier. It's like, dude, stop eliminating.
To be fair, to a certain degree, the Siebel thing can be total bullshit. Not that it's not great for a lot of different reasons, but in and of itself, if you don't have some experience, it's kind of useless without some experience. I would take what Anello did way over 2, 6, or 12-week course at Siebel.
Certainly more hireable, I
Yeah.
would say. with
Oh,
experience.
yeah. I would take somebody that has even 1 year or even 6 months cleaning tanks
Yeah.
over somebody with a 12-week course at Siebel.
Yeah, I would call our requirement there for a while to have people with a brewing education as a phase that we grew out of.
really.
Yeah, because, we wanted that. We wanted somebody because we didn't have that education, we learned in the trenches. And we wanted people to come in that had that experience, that education that maybe, in our minds, maybe knew more than us, that could bring something to the table that we didn't have, right? In hindsight, it's just not saying we didn't need that, because I think you always need more education. You always, even still, we still need to learn more. We still need to do better at what we do. But ultimately, those dudes come in, and in our experience at least, and I'm not knocking Siebel because I think it's a wonderful thing, but you get two very distinct paradigms there. You get, I know what the fuck I'm doing and I'm going to do it this way and your way is wrong, which is dude, we've been in business for 20 years at this point. That's not going to fly here. Or it's Central Waters has a great rep and this is a perfect stepping stone to my next brewery job, which sucks, for us. So what we've taken to is experience, or really local. If you live around here, we can teach you to make beer, and we have those guys now. We've got dudes that were the first shift brewer. Brandon was a home brewer, and he was a service manager at the Toyota dealership in Plover.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
a ridiculous. He lived right up the street too. You can see his house from here, and he had just had a ridiculous homebrew set up right in his garage.
Yeah, and when we started hiring for brewer, he applied, and I knew him because I had a Toyota Prius at the time, and that's how I knew Brandon. And we're like, well, the benefit of hiring somebody local, because mind you, we're not in Milwaukee or Madison or Chicago, Twin Cities, where there's a plethora of people to choose from. Amherst is a town of 1,000, and the nearest big town is Stevens Point, which is about 25,000. We don't have the greatest number, population of people to pull from. So I'd rather hire somebody local who knows that they're here, whose roots are planted, that's going to stay here. And we try to fashion the brewery, frankly, in such a fashion that people can stay here if they choose to, that they can make a career here, that there's good benefits, there's perks to the job that allow you to have a family and make a retirable career here. We try to make that happen. So
that actually brings us to our next question: is when you guys made the move from Junction City, why did you guys choose Amherst?
There were a lot of cities that were interested at that time. When we decided that we had to move out of that building in Junction City, have you guys ever were you guys ever in that building?
It was falling apart,
Yeah,
right? It
not
was
been
quite
there.
dilapidated when you
Yeah.
guys moved out.
I mean, it was a stand and
It was dilapidated when they moved in.
I mean, it was bad, really bad. I don't know how we made drinkable beer out of that place for as long as we did. Man, that place was awful, and it was really, really tiny. And Canadian National Railroad spur that was defunct the whole time we were there, and then they started it up again, and you could touch the train and the building at the same time. That's how close it was to the building, and they didn't offer us any compensation. You could see the tank shaking. It's this is just, we got to go. So the way that all worked out is like I said earlier, I had kind of left and done my career thing for a while, and then I came back. And then I come back and I bought out Paul's original business partner, Clint, in January of 2006. And then Clint was just done with the business, completely gone. And part of that deal, when Paul and I talked about me coming back and me, buying Clint out, and Paul and I are equal partners now at this, that, Junction City's not the place for us, because it's either in this position where you go, we are maxed out here at 750 barrels of beer a year. We can't keep doing this where we're at. So we either close this place up, or we do what we didn't want to do and take on some debt and build a new facility. So we went to Junction City and told them that will stay. There's a guy in Junction who owns some land. At the time, Highway 10 went right through Junction City. It doesn't anymore, it bypasses, but at the time it went right through. In fact, the brewery was right on Highway 10, so Central Waters has always been on Highway 10. We offered to stay. We just said we have to figure out how to get water, power, and sewer there. And I kid you not, the village president just stone cold looked at us and said, "We'd actually prefer you left." Okay.
Joke's on him now.
Well,
right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, he's long gone, but so many other people in Junction are so pissed that didn't come to fruition, because now, I mean, but who could have predicted back then? But look how many people we draw into a town. You know, like, and Junction City, now Highway 10 bypasses them, so there's not a lot going on in Junction these days.
And now cities are courting breweries to come to their town, so to push one out is incredible.
Marshfield was interested back then, Point was interested, Rapids, but again, it wasn't like people were vying to get us, you know, not like today where, you know, if we put out that we're going to move, there'd be cities offering crazy deals to try to get us to come in. But our banker is the International Bank of Amherst. Our lender was here, right? And at the time, Amherst, we knew a lot of people in Amherst drank Central Waters. Like, that was a community of people that were Central Waters drinkers. And so we chose Amherst. It was a small town. It wasn't Point. For better or for worse, this is the town we chose. And really, I think what proves the ignorant wiseness of what we did, the first month we moved here, we were at the grocery store. I was at the grocery store buying groceries for the brewery, and I'm standing in line. At the time, nobody knew who I was. Now, generally speaking, most locals know who I am and Paul is. And I'm standing in line, and these locals are in front of me talking, and I could hear them. They're talking about Central Waters coming to Amherst, you know. But it was the way they were talking about it. They weren't saying, "Hey, did you hear Central Waters is coming to town?" They said, "Did you hear our brewery's moving to Amherst?" Our brew. Like, they had that possessive tone to it. I'm like, yeah, this is it, man. We moved to the right place.
So, I mean, you guys get an awesome local crowd pretty much every weekend, every day that you're open, right?
Correct. Yeah, we sure do.
All right, we got empty glasses, so I think this is a good time to take a little break. And when we come back after some beer news, we'll talk about some more stuff here at Central Waters. So we'll be right back.
Welcome to another edition of Beer News. This episode's easily accessible beer is Unite the Clans by Third Space Brewing Company. Unite the Clans is a Scottish rye ale with slightly roasty and malty flavors and aromas. The addition of Cara rye malt and Fuggles, a classic hop from the British Isles, give this beer an underlying spiciness, toffee notes, and a unique bready complexity. Unite the Clans also recently won a gold medal at the 2017 Great American Beer Festival. Congrats, Third Space. This beer news is jam-packed with upcoming beer releases local to Wisconsin. We start the release news with our current episode's highlight, Black Gold. This Saturday, October 14th, Central Waters releases their latest edition of Black Gold into the world. If you didn't get tickets or register for the River Run, get on your trading shoes, as this beer will only be obtainable via trade or purchased at a ridiculous markup from a third party. If you love the 19th anniversary stout, you're going to want to get your hands on Black Gold, as it's the 19 aged in barrels for an extra year. If you're going to the event and see Jesus, make sure you give him a high five and maybe a short interview, because he will be there covering the event. On Wednesday, October 18th, Black Husky releases Sparkly Eyes. This imperial version of the spruce juice is sure to pack a punch, and previous year's releases have had rave reviews. Black Husky always throws a great party, and prizes will be awarded for the best reenactment of the SNL More Cowbell skit, and also for best sparkly outfit. Sounds like a great Wednesday night to us. Third Space Brewery will be having a release on Saturday, October 28th. They start their barrel age series with two epic releases on the same day. Beer number 1 is Haunted Barrel, a candy bar porter. This porter was brewed with coconut and then aged on rum and bourbon barrels for 6 months with vanilla, cocoa, and cinnamon. There is a 3-bottle allotment with this one, folks, so there should be plenty to go around. And so there might be even some of this floating around in Milwaukee in the local distribution network. Beer number 2 is a very limited variant called Haunted Hazelnut. This version of Haunted Barrel was aged only in rum barrels with vanilla, cocoa, and hazelnut added. Only 1 bottle per person, so make sure you get to Third Space early for that one. Also on the 28th, Eagle Park's second beer in their special release bottle series drops. Their triple dry hopped Immortal Soul with Nelson Sauvignon hops releases at Eagle Park in Bayview upon open. Check their social media for bottle count news news because club members get first dibs the day before the release. Start planning now for Lakefront's annual Black Friday release on November 24th at 8 a.m. We suggest getting there super early this year, as a 1-bottle limit very special edition will be available to the first 1,000 people. This XXX Black Friday release is a blend of the previous 3 years of Black Friday. Not only can you get this, but 3 bottles of the regular Black Friday, which was aged in rye whiskey barrels this year for the first time ever. This event is always a blast, and a must-attend for the whole TTP crew every year. So we'll see you in line super early, and maybe we'll share a beer. And this has been an upcoming beer release special edition of Beer News.
And thank you again for another on-point and informative beer news, Andy.
All right, so as we sit here, we're staring at a bottle of Black Gold, and that brings up a question kind of that we touched on earlier. What are your thoughts on the aftermarket? Oh, there you
There it
go.
goes. All right.
What are your thoughts on the aftermarket of your beer? I mean, it's obviously very highly sought after, and a lot of people are buying this for, a lot of money.
Here's the thing, I don't know of a brewer that appreciates the idea that their beer gets sold for those dollar amounts after it leaves the brewery. Number one, it's illegal, and we try not to do anything illegal, okay? So it is what it is, man. I mean, there's no control over it, and that's the part that sucks. Top on Goliath went through that shit when they had some dude refilling their bottles with something else and selling them and trading them for other things, but whatever. It is what it is. There's no stopping it. Personally, I don't think brewery owners have any place to weigh in on it. It's out of our control. It's after our control of that product has stopped. So what happens beyond that, I might have my preferences, but I wish it wouldn't happen. I'll say that. There's a reason, like we talked about when I pulled this bottle out. I don't even know how old this Black Gold is. We have multiple vintages here, and I don't know how old it is because we don't put the year on it. And a lot of people tell us, we should put the year on the Black Gold so we knew what vintage is in our cellar. But here's the deal, man. It's beer, right? And we've aged that beer for 3 years before it hit a bottle. So if I put a year on it, that will entice you to go ooh, I'm going to age this one out for 5 years or whatever. It's already 3 years old when it's in the bottle. Who else do you guys know is doing 3-year-old barrel-aged beers? There's not a lot of that shit going on, right? I don't want to put a year on it because I don't want you to, if you want to do it, you write the year on it. Drink it, man. Drink it. That's the idea. We're making beers, all of our barrel-aged beers, we brew not so that you have to buy it and age it. We brew it so that it's where we want it to be when we put it to a bottle and you can buy it. So drink it now.
Actually, that's a fantastic lead-in. We've asked pretty much every brewer that we've interviewed what your thoughts are on the home aging process. Matt and Kelly from Half Acre came out very hard against it. And that was the first time that somebody had said, we prefer that you just drink it now because we've aged it to the point that we think it's perfect and now is the time to do it. But we know that there's a lot of folks out there who age stuff for 4 or 5 years, past the point where it might even be good. Do you guys, so you guys definitely don't encourage that, or do you have any thoughts on the experimentation of it?
I for sure encourage the experimentation. If you want to age it out, go for it, but that's at your own risk. But just what in the background, what invariably happens, if I put on a bottle of Black Gold, age through 2021 or whatever, right? I put some shit on it. I don't know how you're aging it. You might put that on top of your fridge in the sunshine at 90 degrees, and when you drink it in 2021, somebody's going to email the brewery and be like, hey, I opened your beer and it was bad, I want a refund. It's dude.
5 years later.
I don't have... It's already 3 years. Here we are. I'm actually confident. I think this is last year's, but it tastes like butterscotch. It's like butterscotch. It's delicious, right? What I comfortably tell people is all of these barrel-aged beers we make every year. So drink it within a year, and I'm comfortable saying that. Drink it within a year.
Yeah, we've recently had the 19.
Because we're making it again.
The 19 was a blended.
It's been blended since 17.
For me, that tasted ready to go right out.
That's the goal.
It tasted aged,
Yep.
it had been sitting in my cellar for a number of years.
Let me put it this way. From we're beer lovers, and we're just yes, we own Central Waters, Paul and I, but we're just dudes that like beer at the end of the day. We're family men, we're people, right? If I bought a bottle of beer and the brewery sold it to me for a high dollar that I bought it from, and the intent was now you age it, I'd be like, fuck you, dude. You age it. I've already paid you for something to drink. And so that's the take we have on it, is the beer should be drinking capable the day that you buy it. What's the point of like, it's like, you know, it costs money to age a beer out, right? So it's like, if I'm going to charge you the same amount of money, hey, here's a beer that needs a ton of aging, same price, in 2 years it'll be worth the price I charge you for it. They'd be like, fuck you, man. And what other industry is that acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite the scam that the wine industry has been going for quite a number of years. A lot of folks maybe don't realize that in addition to the manufacture of the barrels that you have stamped on the side, you should also have a big dollar sign, because this is a lot of money that you've laid out in capital that's just sitting here.
This is the most expensive room in the facility right here that we're sitting in.
And you're doing that so that
The beer's ready to drink at where we want it the day you buy it. Does it age well? Of course it does. Can you age it? Of course you can. Am I going to guarantee you anything? Absolutely not.
So with the Black Gold we're drinking right now, it's got a nice butterscotch quality to it.
Yeah.
What qualities should they be looking for besides that? People who have this sitting in their basement, and people who are going to pick it up this weekend.
Here's the deal with Black Gold. Black Gold is always the prior year's anniversary beer aged one more year. We change the anniversary beer every year. We do that on purpose. It's a different blend every year. It changes every year. So Black Gold changes every year. It's different every year.
This year would be
Will be 19
year?
age, correct. So it'll be 19 age an extra year.
which was already
Okay.
aged 21
19
months.
is, so the anniversary
21
beer
months.
is 2 years roughly, and Black Gold's 3. So every year is different. So that's a hard question to answer because we literally, and I'm not even kidding you, Black Gold is still here. We haven't blended it and packaged it yet. So we haven't tried Black Gold of this year yet. But
So
that's gonna taste
what's the 20th anniversary going to be? Can we get into that?
like. It's going to be another stout.
They're
Gonna be another aged
They're
stout.
going full sour this year, Jim. Full sour.
I'm confused by the question. What have we been talking about for 15 fucking minutes?
But it's a different it's a different beer every year.
Jim just got here.
No, I'm just kidding. So everybody expects 20 to be a big, because it's 20 years, right?
Yep.
Like that's like the big blowout. Is it going to be awesome? Yeah, it's going to be awesome for sure. But that's not the big year, man. Not for a brewery. 20 is not the big year. 21 is a big year.
That's when you're legally.
The brewery's old enough to drink. That's the big year, man. That's the year you blow that shit out.
Yeah.
And you have like variants of different. I shouldn't even talk about it. You just do awesome shit. You do awesome
Oh,
shit.
breaking
It'll be awesome
news.
shit.
Just tease this a little bit there, though.
That'll be awesome shit. Yep. 21 will be awesome.
One thing that we always like to ask our brewers on the Tap Takeover Podcast is if you were to take over the taps at the Tap Takeover Podcast and use the beers that you choose to tell your story, the story of your brewery, which beers that you guys produce or have produced would you guys use to kind of tell that story?
The identity of Central Waters, I think everybody agrees, is barrel aging. That's how Central Waters is kind of, we've put our name on the map as the barrel aging program. And Mud Puppy Porter, best-selling porter in Wisconsin. Like, that's still our number one beer, which is crazy. We still sell more porter than anything else. So when Simon comes on board, he gets his feet under him a little bit, goes through a couple cycles of other brewers coming and going or whatever, and starts taking more of a leadership role here. I remember having a conversation with him, and Simon telling me how much it pisses him off that people don't consider Central Waters a good brewery for hoppy beers. Because we were making some beers that we thought were respectable hoppy beers at the time, but we just got overlooked in our portfolio, right? Because we're the Barrel Aging Brewery, the Mud Puppy Brewery, and Satin Solitude Brewery or whatever. So like hops wasn't part of, I think, people's perception of who Central Waters was, but internally it was. I thought of it that way, you know, and I remember Simon saying that, and that's kind of when we were like, this dude is going to be the one to help us get that. And so if you were to ask me that question 5 years ago, that lineup would be barrel-aged beers, and it would be Mud Puppy, and it would be stouts, and maybe a seasonal. But today, because of Simon, it's HHG is a part of that identity. Rift is now a part of that identity, and that wouldn't have been the case before Simon.
Yeah, for me, it's a personal thing. I think for me it'd be bourbon barrel stout.
Yeah.
For me, bourbon
For
barrel
sure, bourbon barrel
stout.
stout. That's our,
You have to,
that's our
yeah.
first one. That's our flagship. We still sell more of that than any other barrel aged beer.
Yeah, for me it's bourbon barrel stout. I think porter. Porter to me is the Junction City beer. Was that a Jerome and Mike beer?
Yeah, the first three beers: Mud Puppy Porter, Wisconsin Red, and Happy Heron Pale Ale. They were still making
Those
two of
all
them.
made the jump from the Junction City to
They did, but then we
to
stopped making
Amherst.
Happy Heron.
Okay.
So we haven't made that for quite a few years. But we still make the red, and we obviously the porter.
Yeah, I feel like porter, bourbon stout, and bourbon stout started in Junction City too, right?
It did, yeah.
And I'd say HHG.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Go
about
ahead.
the HHG. Where did the collaboration with the Wisconsin-centric band kind of come from? Were you guys friends with them, or did they approach you about
we
making
still
a
are
beer?
friends with them, yeah.
Okay.
They played a couple shows out here, actually, and this is, they've gotten a lot more popular and a lot bigger since they started playing out here way back in the day, but the first show, and we're sitting right now in the barrel house of Central Waters, for those of you listening, and we're surrounded by a shitload of barrels at the moment, but
Yes.
when they played here, there weren't a lot of barrels in there. This was a pretty wide open space. It was shortly after we built it, I want to say, when Horseshoes played here, and 1,000 people came in here to watch them play. At that show, we had talked about making a beer with them. Now this just kind of like with them formed, because they were an up and coming band, and we're like, hey, our product goes out wider than your music does. We can throw your name on something, do this thing, and that'll help get it out there. And just kind of struck this deal with them. Now I think we've kind of hit a point where their popularity has soared, and I think ours has too. So that's still an interesting relationship. And that was shortly after the conversations with Simon about him being upset that we're not known for hoppy beers, and us saying, because I'd been talking about redoing our IPA for years, but we had been making a session India Pale Ale that started, it was called Horicon, and it just, we had jumped, it was one of my, looking back, it was one of my mistakes that I've learned from, is not to jump on bandwagons when it comes to beer styles, and the session IPA craze was one of those that we jumped on, and we made a session IPA that I thought was good. That beer was solid, but nobody gave a shit because it didn't say Founders on it, right? So, this is the truth, man. So, anyways, I'll let Simon take it from there, because that's when we started making the Pale Ale. That's when we first made HHG.
Yeah, well, that's when Mosaic and Citra were like super hard to get for hops for brewers, and literally we got like one 44-pound box of each, like, because if you weren't a huge brewery that were like high on a list for a hop union or a hop steiner, these hop companies, it was hard to get a good allotment of these hops. And so we got like one box of each of these, and we only had a 30-barrel brew house at the time, so it was like, what do we want to do with these hops? And we needed a one-off beer because we were going to do a collaboration beer with Horseshoes, that band. That was, I feel like I've had a handful of opportunities where I kind of took the bull by the horns, and I remember texting Anello, I got a badass pale ale recipe to use these hops for it, and that I just wrote over the weekend. And if I wouldn't have done that, we probably would have came up with something all together or whatever, but I wanted a shot at this for myself, and so I wrote this recipe for a pale ale. He's like, all right, let's do it. And I don't even think he looked at it, or our old lead brewer at the time signed off on it. And anyways, we brewed that, and it turned out really well. We were able to get enough hops to do it about 6 months later to make it a year-round beer, because we all just loved it. So that became a year-round for us, and that
Still love it.
yeah, and that's like our number 2 seller, just behind Mud Puppy, I think, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What percentage of the portfolio is Mud Puppy and HHG?
oh boy, of the entire portfolio, I'd have to look at the numbers for that. I can tell you, barrel aging is about 30% of our volume. I would say our top 3-ish beers, so let's say Mud Puppy, HHG, and Honey Blonde are probably accounting for definitely over half of that volume. So, here's the interesting thing about Central Waters' portfolio, and this is what makes us unique. And I've had this conversation with all of my wholesalers, because they also are a little bit baffled by it. Generally speaking, a brewery that has some popularity has a beer. That's like when that guy, like that brewery owner, goes into the wholesaler and you say, if you can get me one tap line and one placement, it's this one. We've never really had that. All of our beers sell pretty well. If there's a super dog, it just gets cut, So for the most part, like when Simon's like, yeah, Mud Puppy's number 1, HHG's number 2, that split between Mud Puppy and HHG is not wide. It's pretty damn close. Everything just kind of like our whole portfolio just kind of sells pretty well. You have the better ones, the Mud Puppies, HHGs, the Honey Blondes, like those sell better, and Riff now is like up there. So now we have these 4 kind of like mainstays. They all sell well.
Yeah,
So
with 30% being the barrel aging too, is
30%
you're very
barrel
diverse
aging.
across the board.
we're super diverse across the board, and that's what I pitch to everybody is the thing that sets us apart isn't the barrel aging. It's the fact that no matter your beer palate, we make a beer for you.
Now, you're continuing down the hoppy beer path, though, right? You released Caught in the Rain recently. That's a very hop-forward beer for you guys. I was really surprised at how technically hoppy it was. Are you going to continue to do those special releases that are going to get as hoppy as that? Kind of the hazy New England style?
Oh, don't call it New England style. Don't call it. Get out of here. Interview over. No, here's the thing. Like I said earlier, we've been down that path of chasing trends. We just don't do it anymore, man. And so, like, yes, are you going to keep seeing stuff like that? Yeah, man. Simon's like, we have more ideas in this program than we have time in the year to release the beers. And that's no bullshit. A lot of it's coming out of the barrel house, yes, but there are more ideas for beers to get released here that we don't. Central Waters' production calendar is full. So anytime there's a new beer, something's got to come off of that calendar because we can't squeeze any more in, you know? So, yes, you're going to continue to see that growth. You know, Caught in the Rain, I wouldn't call it, the haziness comes from the fruit, you know? So I would call that more of a pineapple beer than a hoppy beer myself.
The pectins in the fruit are what caused it. Yeah, that wasn't
a New England style IPA. We're not going to make a New England style IPA. I've had a lot of people ask for it.
Breaking news.
I will never say never about anything, but I don't see us doing that. I mean, would you want to make one?
No, I have no interest. No.
Yeah, see,
I
so no.
I think it masks the whole hop thing. I'm very opinionated
I get
on
the
thing.
flavor of them. Like, I've had some really good ones. I'm like, yeah, that's like drinking a glass of fruit juice, you know?
And milk.
Exactly, dude. It's just kind of like, man.
Yeast
The
slurry.
lactose.
You know, and then I've seen brewers do it different ways, and you have they're adding like flour to the fucking beer, and then I've seen it on the shelf with like, you know, just like dough at the bottom of the bottle.
It's like looking through
man?
It's like looking through a painting through a fogged glass window.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, we've been doing this for 20 years, and I think I've had the difference is I've had the experience and the opportunity to see things come and go and the way trends go in waves. And it's really, really easy to get caught up in a trend and lose your way. And it's a mistake. Every brewery doesn't always have to be on every trend. That's a mistake as well. That's something that I've learned over the years. So you have to know who your identity is as a brewery. Who are you? What are you good at? What do you like? Like, you meaning me and Simon and everybody else that works here.
Yeah.
That's way more important than what people are telling you is going to sell. Is what do we like to do? Because we have the opportunity that we've been in business for 2 decades. So the sort of bubble that we're in right now for craft beer is going to go. Like, that's going to pop. Things will shake out. We're going to be here still. And the tried and true thing for long term is sticking to your guns of who you are. And those styles that we're really good at, that make Central Waters who Central Waters is, are the ones that are going to always be here in 20 years again. A new trend comes out and it's like, awesome, that's not who we are. Now you say that, but at the same time, you have to be cognizant of the fact that we are 20 years old, and it's really easy to become old and in the way. We've done a pretty good job, I think, of not becoming old and in the way, of becoming, you know, trendsetters, staying exciting to the consumers, you know, like cutting Glacial Trail and making riffs, coming up with, you know, in January there's a new barrel-aged beer coming out that everyone's going to lose their shit over, and there's not a lot of it. And there's other ones coming out, they're going to be retro ones that people are going to be like, get the fuck out of here, you're making this again. So, you know, you have to do those things to stay engaging, because what customers engage with is the new brewery, right? If you're a new brewery, everyone's super excited for you. Yeah. Everybody's excited, right? Good for them, but that makes it really hard for us, who's been around for a long time. And so that's where you can easily start like, oh geez, I better make a fucking New England IPA because that new dude in Milwaukee's making a New England IPA, and if I don't do it, he's taking all my HHG tap lines. That's fine. We're not in this to make money now. The way that Paul and I run this business, and always have, is I expect Central Waters to outlive me. That's the mindset we have. The brewery outlives us. We've made those mistakes in the past with chasing that trend, so don't chase the trend, because that's a short-term thing. What's our long-term sustainability method? And that's not doing that.
Speaking of some of those beers that you guys have kind of specialized in and you guys are known for, and as a way to kind of close out this Tap Takeover for the Tap Takeover podcast.
We're done already?
In order to... No, just the first part.
Wait, how many parts are there?
Oh, I did not agree to that.
You didn't say there was
Seven. It's a 7-part interview. But no, in order to get the beer nerds out of bed in the morning, you have to throw a couple of special releases on tap. So which of your special releases would, let's say one apiece, would you guys choose to kind of, again, tell that story of Central Waters? Which special release beers are you guys most proud of?
Well, okay. Which one are we most proud of, or which one would we use to get people off their ass to come to it?
Both.
How about both?
Because to me, those are
It's
two
a good
different
distinction.
this
Yeah,
is an Anello
it's a good
question, I
distinction.
think.
No, I think he said each of us. You go first.
Special release beers to get people off.
That's it.
I think was the question.
That actually was
the goal.
exact-
And this is my frustration. Way more than the hoppy thing and all that stuff, like not being known for hoppy beers. My biggest frustration, like working at this brewery, is the people wanting only barrel-aged beers from us, period. And our barrel-aged beers are too thin. That one kills me.
It's Festivus time. I got a lot of problems with you people.
And now you're going to hear about them.
The airing of grievances.
Am I
has
loud
begun.
enough now?
This is now the airing of grievances podcast.
A lot of problems
Turned out
with
his mic.
Be moving on to the feature strength shortly.
No, that one
I'm
is
with you
like
on
that one is like 12.5%, 13% is we're not big enough for you yet. Like, what do you want? Do you want instant diabetes and like an instant hangover? Like, what are you doing this for?
I wouldn't say no.
Right. Like our maple stout, that thing is thick, and that thing is like, that thing has thighs on it. Like,
That is diabetes in a glass.
yeah. And I love that beer.
Yeah, it's good.
But I don't want more than 6 ounces to 8 ounces of it, and I don't, and that's sipping over an hour or so. You know what I mean? That's a bomber that you share with 3 or 4 people, and my point is those are the beers that like maple stout stuff like that is what people lose their mind over. We have a big beer festival coming up next weekend, not even the river run at the brewery, a different one in Wisconsin Dells, and people are emailing saying, are you going to have maple stout, are you going to have this and this and this, so maple stout, black gold, any of the anniversary beers, those are the ones that people fight over usually. So that's the stuff that gets people out of bed. For me, it's I'm excited over some of this stuff we got going in wine barrels. Like, that's the stuff I'm excited over.
Yeah, I'd say most proud is Bourbon Barrel Stout. I mean, it was the trendsetter for us.
Yeah, you can't tell the story of Central Waters without talking about the bourbon.
That is my
barrel stout.
hands down
I mean,
favorite.
that was-
I love that beer still.
2001, we filled the first bourbon barrels with stout.
And
We got
how many barrels did you fill that first
4.
run?
Pretty fucking far ahead of the curve, if I don't say so myself, on barrel aging. I mean, back then in 2001, like Goose was doing it and Founders was doing it, but we didn't know about them. I think we might have heard that there's a Goose Island brewery making barrel aged beers, but it really got sparked by another brewer in state who will go unnamed because what he was doing was illegal. And we had his stout that he had filled his tank with oak chips and bottles of Jack.
Oh, jeez.
And we were drinking it going like, okay, I see how this could be good.
The idea is Sal.
Yeah, the idea is sound, yeah. We knew a guy that knew Harlan Wheatley from Buffalo Trace. And we got in touch with him, and he thought we were batshit crazy and sold us barrels for $25 a piece directly out of Buffalo Trace, and we filled 4 oaks. And you have to understand something about Central Waters, especially when it comes to the barrel aging program, to appreciate the level we're at now. We don't have multi-millionaire investors behind us, private equity behind us, and Paul and I are not rich people. So the growth of Central Waters has been funded by Central Waters for 20 years. So you start with 4 oaks, and the next year you have 6, and then you have 10, and then you have 20, and then you have 50, and now we have
4,000.
4,000. We're sitting amongst 4,000 now, right? So, and that's just, you take the profits from it and you buy more the next year. So that's the way we've kind of grown it. So Bourbon Barrel Stout started that. I'm the most proud of that because I think it is a really technically well done barrel aged stout. It gives you great flavor profile of the barrel and the beer, and that's the thing that people miss when it comes to barrel aging. It's not as easy as throwing a beer into a barrel and then taking it out and calling it barrel aged. There's a period of time where it's not enough barrel aged, and then quickly it becomes too much barrel aged. So you have to hit it right, and I think Bourbon Barrel Stout represents a barrel aging category extremely well. If I had to bring one beer in that would get beer nerds out of bed, Exodus.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, talk
a
to
good
us about
answer.
that one.
Yeah,
I
it'd
hate
be
you.
Exodus. I'd say Peruvian Morning, but that's already coming back. Oh, mic drop.
What is it? So that was a great first part of the interview with the guys at Central Waters. And welcome back. We're doing the second tasting of the 18 and the 19. Personally, I thought the 18 was probably the disappointment of the anniversary beers, although very good.
Yeah, I guess I tend to agree. For me, there's a special place in my heart for the 19. I was able to get out there for the week after their anniversary. It was a really fun experience. Just getting to buy some leftover bottles that folks didn't pick up. Not everybody buys their allotment at the anniversary party, and there's sometimes some extra. So they had quite a few to go through. So this one has a special place in my heart just because I've had a few of them, and they're really, really good. I do think that there are some hints of the 16. We talked about that a little bit earlier, how the initial stout that was used in the 16, it was just the one stout, whereas everything after that has gotten blended a bit. But the 19 has got a bigger portion of the original stout, of that Fat Elvis in it. I'm really enjoying this one.
Yeah, for me, the 19 comes a little pre-aged. Like, it comes ready for you to consume now because they've already let it lay down for all these years. You didn't have to go back to 4 years ago for the 16 and have bought that to lay it down.
So do you think this one's going to take on any flavor profiles if you age this one? Or do you think this one's like Matt and Kelly from Half Acre say, just ready to go right now?
Yeah, for me, I think this is ready to drink now because all the aging's already been done for you.
Well, that would be the experiment part of it with the 19. But if this was a race, I would say 1A, 1B is 16 and 19 because I really think very highly of this. Smooth, it had everything that the 16 had. I guess my thought on the beer is 19 is just amazing. And if it was kind of ranking them, it would be 1A, 1B with 16. I think that both have very equal qualities. It's so smooth right now. Definitely do not age 19. I would just drink it now. 18, I mean, compared to the other ones, it just doesn't live up to the other ones. It should be set down a little bit longer, maybe a couple years, honestly. It comes out pretty hot, very aggressive.
Well, and that's the thing. The 18 doesn't have the advantage that the 16 and 17 have, which is a couple more years. The 18 was just last year, so it may still be a little hot. I also tend to disagree with you on the 19. I think there's definite aging possibilities on the 19. I think it's great right now, but I also think that a couple years down the line, this could be even better. It could leap into that black fruit kind of territory.
Yeah, but it's like when you want to age something like this, I don't know what else you want to find.
Yeah, what else is it going to mature into? I'm looking for something in the background that's going to come forward or something in the front end that's going to mellow back. For me on the 19, it's kind of all there right now, where on the 18, it's raw. Yeah. I mean, this is a raw beer and still.
I guess basically to our whole thoughts of aging in general, we always think of aging a beer just to take that edge off, make it smoother, make it that just really bring out that nose. And I think that 19 has it right now.
I kind of agree with Alex. I think you could lay down the 19 for a little bit. You're going to get those different notes out of it because it's already pre-aged beer in the mix, right? You're going to get the beer they brewed specifically to mix with it recently, and those notes are going to come out while the other notes start to fade away.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And I'll also say this about the 19. There's a lot of flavors in there. The coffee, the vanilla, the chocolate that are really strong right now. And I would like to see those, almost like you said with the 16 Jim, kind of fall away into their own distinct categories where it tastes a little more deconstructed. I could definitely see that happening over the next, 3-4 years.
Yeah, there's some places for this beer to go. There is still that touch of hotness, a little boozy, that could fade away and allow other more subtle flavors to come up. So it'll be really interesting in a year or two to see where this beer goes.
We got a few more. We can come back and revisit this. No, but I don't think you lose either way. It's like, it's great now. Guys from Half Acre say it's an experiment, Just kind of lay it down and see what happens, but I like it now.
The whole tasting's just been a win-win.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I don't think there's any losers here.
And the interview's been a win-win as well. I mean, to hear these brewers talk about their amazing beers and talk about the aging process, and it's just been so much fun to talk to these guys. So join us next week for part 2 of our 3-part Central Waters interview series when we hear more about the Exodus, more about some special beer releases, and more about the barrel aging process. And I think on that note, it looks like we're probably out of beer. For me, for Alex,
for Jesus,
for Andy,
I'm Jim.
And thank you again for the Gleasons for our theme music, and this has been a solid non-fail production.
Cheers.
Cheers.